Thank you so much for joining us online here at Fam Church. Now, just a reminder, there are two ways for you to stay connected with us here at Fam Church. You can go out to myfamchurch.com or head over to Facebook at facebook.com/famchurch and give us a like. There you will get all of your event information and news from us here at Fam Church. And now, our series, #thestruggleisreal, and our lead pastor, Brian Lane.
As I said, we're finishing this series called The Struggle is Real, and our goal and our point in this series has been to look at some of the things that we struggle with in life, some of the struggles that we have in our house, some of the struggles that we have with our family, some of the struggles that we have in our jobs and just the world in general. And we just aren't looking at these problems and trying to devise solutions, but we're trying to come up with what is Jesus' perspective on these things, on these events, on these problems, on these struggles. And so that's what we're doing. And if you missed any of the previous messages, you can go to myfamchurch.com and click on our media tab. Once you get there, you can click on the graphic for the message, the #The Struggle is Real, that graphic right up there, and you can watch all of the previous messages in this series. And so today's struggle is the struggle of following Jesus in a world that keeps moving further from Jesus each and every single day. And if you've spent any time, if you've lived any of your life walking with Jesus, you know this struggle, you get this struggle, you understand this struggle because, it's just the struggle to do things the right way, to do them the way Jesus wants us to do them, regardless of what else is going on in the world, regardless of what other people are speaking to us, regardless of the stuff that is happening. It's the struggle, to get up in the morning, to read your Bibles, to pray, to give, even to get up and come into this building on a Sunday morning when you could be doing plenty of other things. It's the struggles that we face in our walk with God. It's the struggle that we want to, punch our coworker in the face because we just can't take him anymore. And it's the struggle saying, I know Jesus, I can't do this, okay? It's the struggle of driving down the road and not wanting to run somebody off of the road because of how idiotic they are. Can I tell you, I'm just going to be real here, I hate driving on 60 every day. You're coming down the road, you're going the speed limit, and some moron will pull out in front of you from a side street thinking it's your responsibility to stop for them, and you almost rear end them. And it's just everything within me just says, Jesus, do something here because someone's going to get hurt. Okay? Those are the things going through my mind, and this is the struggle, and those of us who work in jobs in a secular world where the people around us aren't Christians, we know the struggle of somebody watching each and every single move we make, each and every single thing we do, waiting for that moment for us to screw up so they can look at us, point their finger at us, and say, see, that's why I'm not a Christian, because of stuff like that. And we just want to throw our hands in the air, quit, and give up because the struggle is just too real to maintain our walk with Jesus. Man, I'm there with you. There are Sunday mornings that I wake up and see the sun and say, man, I wish I could go to the beach today. There's days that I will read something in one of the letters of the New Testament and say, man, that doesn't work. I've tried that. It doesn't work. I've been there. There's even days, literally, where I sit in my office and I'm thinking about what I'm going to say on a Sunday morning, and I literally say to myself, is this even true? Is this even relevant? Does this even work? Because walking with Jesus and going against the flow of the current world is a tough battle and challenge. But can I tell you this morning that this is not something that's new? This is not something that we uniquely face. There's somebody else who was in our position, who had to live the life that God was calling him to live, and went through the exact same struggles, the exact same battles, the exact same challenges we do. And where we're going to start this morning is I want to look in the book of Matthew on chapter 26. And Matthew, if you don't know, it's the first book in the New Testament. So if you find the New Testament, Matthew's right there. Go to chapter 26. If you're sitting there saying, I don't know what that is, what that means, I don't have a Bible, don't worry. We're going to put it on the screen behind me so you can follow along. And if you're here this morning and you need a Bible, stop by our Fam Connection Center on your way out the door. They'll put a brand new Bible in your hands for you to take home and read. And so this is what it says in Matthew 26, verses 39 through 44. Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Then he returned to his disciples, and he found them sleeping. "Couldn't you men keep watch with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter. "Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." He went away a second time and prayed, "My Father, if it is not possible for this cup to be taken away unless I drink it, may your will be done." When he came back again, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and went away once more and prayed a third time, saying the same thing. So here's Jesus. He's at the end of his life. He's about to embark on the most intense 3 days that anyone could really experience in life. Okay, he's about to be arrested. He's about to be tried before a cowardly judge with false charges and false accusations. And then he's going to be beaten. He's going to be tortured. And he's eventually going to be put to death. Okay, this is where Jesus is at. This is what he is facing. And in the midst of this, as he is sitting there looking on these days that are ahead of him, the words that come into his mouth is to get down and pray and say, "God, take this cup from me." See, Jesus, the Son of God, looked at what he was going to have to face in following God. He looked at it, and his first thought was, "I don't want to go through this. I don't want to have to face this battle." He's thinking, you know what? God, let's do something different. Let's change the plan. Let's get away from this challenge and difficulties because what you are calling me to do is really hard. The struggle is really real, and I don't want to face what I'm about to go through. See, Jesus struggled with the life that God had called him to live, even though Jesus knew that's what he was going to do. When he was sent here to this earth, God did not cover up the fact that he was going to have to go through all of this. But yet here he is on the verge of fulfilling what he was supposed to do, and here he is saying, "God, take this cup from me." He understands the struggles. He understands the battles. He understands the pressure from this world to conform. And I'm sure the thoughts that were running through his mind was, maybe this isn't worth it. God, if I just do things the way the world wants me to do them, the religious leaders, they want me to stop telling people I'm God. The religious leaders, they want me to stop doing miracles. The religious leaders, they want me to stop preaching. God, if I just go out and do those things, God, if I just stop doing those things and kind of go with the flow of the world, everything will be okay. Everything will be peaceful. Everything will be wonderful. Everything will be awesome. And you know what? In this day and age, our world tells us the same thing that it told Jesus. Just follow us, play by our rules, everything's going to be good. You don't need to do the things that Jesus is calling you to do. You don't need to pray. You don't need to spend time in the Bible. You don't need to be here at church on Sunday. You don't need to set the greatest example at home because it's all going to be good. You don't need to live like Jesus would want you to live when you are at work. You can do things your way, even if you are doing something God says that's not something that should be a part of your life. And see, far too many believers go down that path. Why? Because one, the struggle is very real in following God this day. And two, because going down the path of the world is much easier. It's the path of least resistance, and there's not that much of a struggle involved in doing that. And I have a belief. I believe that the reason we are so tempted in this area is that we don't understand something. What don't we understand? I'm going to read a verse from the letter to the Ephesians to you. And Ephesians is in the New Testament. It was written by a guy named Paul to encourage the church as Paul, sat in a Roman prison awaiting execution for believing in Jesus. And the verse is Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. And if you want to turn there, because we're going to look at more of this section, but I'm just going to read verse 12 right now, and it says this: "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Now, if you've been around church for a while, you've probably heard that verse. If you're sitting in this room and you're over 50, you've probably heard somebody speak on this verse. However, if you're sitting in here and you're under 30 and you grow up in the church, you may not have ever heard that verse mentioned, or you may not have heard that talked about. Why? Because suddenly, this verse is talking about demons. Okay, it's talking about spiritual warfare. And what happens when we get into this world of demons and spiritual warfare? Whoa, okay, you're getting a little weird for me here, dude. We gotta watch the weird stuff, you know. It's okay when you tell us Jesus saves us, but we don't want to get into all that demons and spiritual warfare stuff because the people who talk about that are a little crazy, all right? One of the churches that Dana's dad pastored, before he got there, took the pews out of the sanctuary and burned them in the front yard. Did they hate pews? No. They burned them because they thought the pews were demon-possessed. Okay, I wish I was making that up. They thought the seats were demon-possessed. I mean, what gets into somebody's mind that they think a seat is demon-possessed? I have no idea. But that's what they thought, and that's what people know. That's what people think of. That's what people, get in their brains when you mention something like this verse. They think, oh my goodness, we're going to have demon-possessed chairs, and we're going to have demon-possessed coffee pots, and we're going to have exorcists and people's heads spinning around, and you're getting crazy on us. No. We need to understand this verse because I believe it's the key to pushing through the struggles that we have when it comes to being a follower of Jesus. And I want to start with this word, for we wrestle, or in the NIV it says struggle in this verse. All right, this word here that's translated struggle, that's translated wrestle, is from the Greek. And if you don't know about the whole Greek thing, the New Testament was originally written in Greek because it was the language of the common people back in the time that this letter was written. It was during the Roman Empire, but most of the commoners did not speak Latin. So those of you who took Latin in high school thought you were learning something important. Not even the common people in the Roman Empire spoke Latin, okay? But the word there is pale. And this word means to struggle, to wrestle, and hand-to-hand combat. And at that time, its primary use had to do with sports and sporting events, okay? And it was primarily used for three specific events that they had in that world for sports. That word was used with boxing, that word was used with wrestling, and another form of fighting that was called pancretin, okay? And it sounds like a disease, I know. I'll explain that one in a little bit. But when I say those words, when I say the words boxing, when I say the word wrestling, you guys all have ideas that pop into your head, right? Like maybe you thought of Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather or Ronda Rousey when I said the word boxing, and you got this picture of a referee and a ring and some gloves and some judges sitting there, and a winner is determined through some form, some way. Or maybe when I said wrestling, you thought of the WWE and Jim McMahon, and you were ready to come off one of the turnbuckles onto somebody's head, right? Or maybe you're a little bit more refined than that. When I said wrestling, you actually thought of real wrestling that they do in our high schools and our colleges and in the Olympics, where guys like really just grapple with each other in a ring, okay? Well, back 2,000 years ago, when this was written, these sports, especially, we don't know of this third one, but the first two, wrestling and boxing, were completely different in their function than they are now. So let me tell you a little bit of how these sports functioned, okay? The first of these sports was boxing, but it was nothing like we know boxing today. It was incredibly violent. It was so violent that they were not permitted to box without some sort of head protection, because without head protection, their head would most likely be crushed. Okay? The sport was so severe that very few boxers actually made it to retirement. They usually died in the ring at some point in time. And how they fought was they had gloves. Okay, they were given gloves, but you could do whatever you want to those gloves. Most of the guys would take the gloves and they would put rocks, or they would put a heavy metal inside of the gloves to put extra weight behind the punch. They would also take nails and other long spikes and drive them through the gloves so they would be sticking out. They also took metal and wrapped it around the glove, and they put a serrated edge on the metal. Why would they do that? So that when they landed a good punch, it would take chunks of flesh with it when they pulled away from hitting you. Okay? There were two rules in this boxing. You could not clench somebody's fist. So if they were sitting there like this, you couldn't put your hands or your gloves on top of them to block their fists. And all of contact had to be fist, gloves to body. You couldn't kick. You couldn't do anything else other than punch. Okay? And so that was boxing. And usually boxers at this time, they wouldn't surrender in a fight. Okay? They usually decided that it was more honorable to die in the ring than to surrender and say they lost. And so that's usually what happened. Most of the fights were between people who were undefeated. Wrestling was also very violent, and just like boxing, the fighting ended when someone surrendered or died. Most wrestlers, just like the boxers, did not want to live with the embarrassment of surrendering, so they would fight to the death. There was no mercy rule. If your leg was broken, your shoulder was dislocated, and your eye was gouged out, and you didn't quit, they would let the other guy beat on you until you died. Okay? And this wrestling, you were allowed to strangle someone, you were allowed to choke someone, you were allowed to break arms, legs, ribs, gash their face, gouge their eyes out. The only thing they were not allowed to do was bring anything other than their bodies into the ring, and they couldn't punch with their fists. So it had to be wrestling, grappling, okay? And so they would step up into the ring, both guys would be naked, and they would just fight. And the guy who won was the one who killed the other person in the ring with their bare hands, okay? I mean, they would literally grow their fingernails long and their toenails long so that they could use their fingernails and their toenails as claws to dig into people's skin and to literally gouge their eyeballs out, okay? It was intense. It was crazy. And the last of the sports that I mentioned was pancraton. This was a combination of wrestling and boxing. They had no rules, could use whatever fighting techniques were at their disposal. They could bring the spiked gloves. They could also grab someone by the throat and choke them. They could use their legs or nails. They could punch someone with their bare fists. These guys were the fiercest, roughest, toughest, and most committed at all. In this one, the victor was the one who was left alive at the end. There was no place for surrender in this one. You either had to win and live or die and lose, okay? And the Greeks had a saying that if you were told your son did pancraton and he surrendered before he died, you weren't supposed to believe it because nobody surrendered. Everyone who lost died. So every match was a match, as I said, between two undefeated fighters. It was bloody and it was gory. Okay, and so why did I say all of that? Because when Paul spoke these words, when Paul said they wrestle not, when Paul said the words, you struggle not, this is the image that popped in to the men and women who heard this at the time, okay? And see, when we hear these words, when we hear the words wrestle, when we hear the words boxing, we think of something very sterile. We think of something very organized. We think of something where a fight is fair, where we make sure no one breaks any rules, you know, where we have an environment that somebody's taken too much of a beating, the person delivering the beating backs off, or the referee stops the fight. We go to a place where all of these things govern our matches, but we have to understand, in this fight that we are in to walk and live our life as a follower of Jesus, we are not in a modern day boxing match. We are not in a modern day wrestling match. We are not in a modern day UFC fight, okay? What we are in is we are fighting with an enemy in a ring where there is no referee, and this enemy will put rocks in his glove. He will slip on the brass knuckles. He will cover his gloves in serrated steel. He will find the longest nails he can find and spike his gloves. He will go for our eyes. He will go for our groin. He will go for our temples. Nothing is off limits. He will attack you any way he possibly can, and his only goal is to kill you. And here's the deal. I believe that the reason so many of us struggle in our walk with Jesus is that we get up every morning expecting a fight where there's referees, where there's officials, where there's rules, where there's guidelines, and it's going to work that way. And the thing is, it doesn't. No one fights fair in this fight. Our opponent steps into the ring ready to rip us apart. The opponent, that verse says, the rulers, the authorities, the powers of this dark world, and the spiritual forces of evil are our opponents, and they have every intent on hitting us with everything that they can. They have no rules. They don't care if you think it's fair or not. They are going to come at you. And most of us walk out of our house completely and totally unprepared for this type of fight each and every single day. And that's the first thing that we have to realize. We have to realize that there are spiritual forces out there. And if we are a follower of Jesus, these spiritual forces are hitting us, are attacking us, are just going after us and doing everything they can to kill us and destroy our life. We need to expect it, we need to look for it, and we need to be ready to fight in it. And so once we realize that, the second thing that we need to see is that God, though, has given us what we need to fight in this battle. See, if we continue reading in Ephesians 6 and we read verses 13 through 18, God gives us what we need to fight so that every day we can be ready. And this is what it says in verses 13 through 18 there of Ephesians chapter 6. It says, "Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand, stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. And with this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the Lord's people." See, he's given us things. He's given us armor. The first part of the armor he's given us is this belt of truth. Okay, and so you're thinking maybe, oh, belt, something that'll protect us. You know what? I just need to go to Walmart and get me a belt with a big old belt buckle on it. And if I get that hooked up on me, I've got my belt of truth on, and I'm ready to take anything that comes at me. Well, no, not really. That's not what I would encourage everyone to do, is go to Walmart and buy themselves a big old belt buckle, okay? What I want you to think of when we're thinking about this is the armor that the Roman soldiers wore at the time. Because that's what Paul was thinking of when he wrote these words. And the Roman soldiers had a belt that they wore. And this belt was a strap of leather that went around their waist, and it had small pieces of armament on it in this area here, okay, to protect from where the top piece came down and between there and his legs. And so there was armor here, and then there was a special armor piece that hung down over his groin area. And this is how the Roman soldier dressed. It was there to protect these vital areas, his intestines, and this part of his area, as well as his groin, from attack from the enemy, because this was a very vulnerable area. It was a very dangerous spot that a Roman soldier could be hit, and so this was the armor that he wore. And what Paul is saying here, and saying to put on the belt of truth, is he is saying that much like that belt that the Roman soldier wears, we need to have a belt around our waist that kind of secures everything together and protects these vital areas, and it's called the truth. And I know that this is a challenge in this day and age when it comes to the truth, because a lot of us just don't understand what truth is. And if I stood up here and you're not a follower of Jesus, and I say to you, even some followers of Jesus, I say, you know what the truth is? The truth is God's word revealed in the Bible. Some people will even push back on that. And they'll say, you know what? That's not really the truth. That has some truth in it, but it's not all truth. We've got a problem then if we do that, because where do we get truth from at that point? Does truth come from whatever you think is truth? Well, then that makes you the bastion of truth in the universe, okay? And everything you say is most important. No, what God is saying here is he's saying, my word is truth, okay? And we need to have this truth on, protecting the midsection of our body, holding everything together. This means that we need to know God's word. We need to know what God's word says, because it gives us protection. It keeps us safe and holds everything together. And see, when we get away from truth, it messes everything up. I mean, that's what happened in the Garden of Eden. That's what Satan did with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. He just said to him, did God really say? He planted a little seed of maybe what God is saying is not true, and that just messed the whole thing up, because Eve said, you know what? Maybe Satan is right. Maybe God isn't telling us the truth. Because the forces that are arrayed against us know that if we can start thinking certain things aren't true, certain things aren't right, it can get us off track and get us in a place where we fall. We need to secure ourselves with a belt of truth and use it as a piece of protection. The second piece of armor is the breastplate of righteousness. And the breastplate, it covered the chest area, it protected the heart, the lungs, the liver, part of the stomach, part of the digestive tract. And many of these areas, if they take a direct hit in battle, it'll kill us. And so the soldiers wore this to protect their vital organs. And God has us wear this armor and calls it the breastplate of righteousness, because righteousness and our righteousness protects our heart, who we are at our center. And so maybe you're saying, well, what is righteousness? That's a big word because we throw it around, and many times it's used as a slam. Oh, you think you're so righteous. You know, the kind of thing that we, but what is it? And righteousness means living up to a standard of a relationship, okay? And so I know that brings all kinds of thoughts into our head when we hear that word righteousness. And so living up to a standard, you must mean that we go into the Bible and we find the list of things that we do and we don't do, and we follow the ones that we do and we don't do the things that we don't do. And as long as we're following that list, then that provides us with the breastplate of righteousness. No, that's not what it's saying. It flows more out of relationship. I want you to think about the person you are closest to in your life. If you're married, it's probably your husband or your wife. It could be one of your children. It could be all of your children. It could be a brother. It could be a sister, a boyfriend, a girlfriend. It could be a friend that's like a brother or sister to you. Now, I want you to think about how that relationship works. Husband and wife, what helps keep you close? Is it writing a list of things that you do and don't do, keeping that in your pocket, walking around and pulling it out when you need it and saying, should I do this to my wife? No, bad plan. Okay, good. And keep going. Is that what keeps your relationship strong? No. What keeps your relationship strong is your actual relationship. Spending time together, being united together, connected together on a deep level, on such a deep level that thoughts like, should I cheat on my spouse, they don't really even run through your mind because you are close, because you are connected, because of the relationship. And I think that's what God is talking about here when he talks about this piece of armor. He's not telling us to put together a list of things that we do and don't do. What he's telling us to do is to be in such connection with him, in such relationship with him, that we are just in a place where we just want to do the things that God wants us to do, where our love, where our passion, where our heart from him just flows. And because of that, we just become more righteous because of spending time with him. As we spend more time with him, we lose our taste for sin. We're going to lose our desire for all of those things. We're going to lose the passion for all of those things. And our connection with God is going to push all of those things out. And so I think that's what God's talking about here when he says, put on the breastplate of righteousness. He's saying, make that connection with me strong. Then on our feet, he gives us the sandals of the gospel of peace. A Roman soldier wore these sandals that were pretty intense. Okay, they were made of thick leather, and the bottom of them was covered with spikes. The spikes were used to maintain traction in slippery conditions, but they could also be used as an offensive weapon. These sandals, they gave the Romans distinct advantages against the forces that they fought because of the traction that it gave them in close hand-to-hand combat. When they were in close hand-to-hand combat, the Romans, because of the sandals that they designed, could get a better grip, could get a better position, could just fight better, regardless of the terrain and the situations that they found themselves in. And the thing that that God is talking about here is that we need to anchor our life, keep our feet firm in the peace of God. The peace that knows what's happening around us is in the hand of God, and therefore there is nothing to fear. See, people are the most shaken in their walk with God when things steal their peace. Things that happen in life that shake us in our faith in Jesus. And those things come and they attack and they destroy us. Don't let them destroy you. Instead, stand strong in Jesus, knowing that he has saved you and he's not going to let you go. Let that peace flow through you. Let it use it as a firm foundation to stand on. So when these attacks come in, you have God's peace on you, in you, with you, and surrounding you. Next, Paul tells us to take up the shield of faith. The Roman shield, it was big. It was kind of like a door, and it was made out of leather, several layers of leather. The Roman soldiers, really, to kind of keep the shield pliable, they treated it with oil every day to keep it soft. And when they would go out in battle, they would take the shield and soak it in water. Why would they do that? Because when they got out into battle, the enemy would fire flaming arrows and throw flaming spears at them. Okay, and so if you're standing out there and you're with your shield, and they would have all these soldiers lined up, all standing with the shield as this big defense thing, and flaming arrows came in, and you had just a cowhide there with no water soaked in it, the arrow would just hit it and start it on fire. But with the water, with this being soaked, they couldn't start it on fire. It was just one of the tactics that people used to burn through enemy lines, was to destroy the stuff they used to protect themselves, because it was usually made out of some sort of animal skin or wood. And so the Romans soaked theirs in water to protect themselves against the flaming arrows of their enemy. Satan uses the same tactics against us. He fires flaming arrows at us in the hopes that we will not have our shield, our faith in Jesus, holding strong. Because those powers that we're fighting against know they can shake our faith in Jesus. If they can shake that faith, we're going to be an easier target to defeat. But carrying the shield with us, our faith in God and who he says he will be, will defeat the flaming arrows that Satan shoots at us. Then there's the helmet of salvation. It's the metal helmet the Romans wore on their head. It protects their brain and the head against the arrows and clubs and rocks and other things that flew at their head. The reason there's a helmet for us as followers of Jesus is because Satan will go after our head as well. He will do everything he can to get in our brains and mess with our minds and get us going in the wrong direction. He'll throw ideas in there, and so we put on our helmet of salvation, knowing that God has saved us, God has freed us, and we don't have to give in to those things, those temptations anymore. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. He will keep you from falling to those arrows. And then finally, we have our weapon, the sword of the Spirit. All of us know what a sword is. Most of us have made balloon swords as kids and battled it out. Maybe we got a plastic sword. Maybe we got a lightsaber and fought with those. But we know what they can do. They can cut. They can kill. We know a sword is a powerful weapon. But we have a sword. Once again, the Word of God. All the books and letters contained in that thing we call the Bible, what's written in there has the power to defeat, destroy, cut, and wound those powers, those principalities, those forces that come against us. And then finally, to pray. God says pray. Pray always. Always be in prayer. And so, Lewis, if you could come on back up. This is what I believe about the struggle of walking out, of living out the Christian life, is that we first of all, if we're a follower of Jesus, have to realize that when we walk out that door, things are coming against us. Things are hitting us. Things are going to pound on us. It's not going to be fair. Crazy things are going to happen in life. Crazy things are going to happen in and with everything around us, but it's the enemy using any tactic, anything, any way that he can to get into our life, to mess us up, and to pull us down. And so we need to realize that. We need to realize that when we get up tomorrow and we hear maybe some tragic news, if we get up tomorrow and suddenly something terrible happens, that it's not because God does not love us. It's because we've got an enemy who will do anything he can to take us out and destroy us. But the second thing is this: we need to remember, if we want to push forward in our walk with God and take ground and not be a victim in this, we need to put on this armor that God has given us. Every day we need to get up and we need to put on that helmet of salvation. We need to put on that breastplate of righteousness. We need to put on the belt buckle of truth, the sandals of the gospel of peace. We need to take up the sword of the Spirit and the shield of faith. And we need to stand there and be ready to engage anything that comes at us. If the enemy says one thing, says something else, says something different, we need to know which piece of armor we need to use and fully engage him in the battle. Now, just because we're wearing the armor, that doesn't mean we're going to win all the victories. I know we'll think, well, it's God's armor, so we're going to win everything. No, sometimes we're going to lose some battles. But you know what? Ultimately, the war belongs to God, and we will not be defeated if we stand in his armor each and every single day. And so this is my challenge for you guys this morning. For the next 30 days, I want to challenge everyone to get up in the morning when the brain finally turns on, if that's after you get your first cup of coffee or whatever, to think to yourself, I'm going into a war zone where there are no rules today. I've got to put on the armor of God, and literally think through putting on the armor of God each and every single day for the next 30 days. I can guarantee you that if you do that, you're going to see a difference in the battles that you are fighting. You are going to see a difference in the war that you are engaging in. You're going to see things move to your advantage in some cases where you didn't think they would, because you took God at His word, you stood in faith in His armor, and you went to battle. And so that's my challenge this morning. For those of us in this room that say, we are a Christian, I am a follower of Jesus, that's my challenge for you today to do that. If you're not a Christian, do the same thing. See what God will do in that situation. I'm going to close with a word of prayer, so if everybody could close your eyes. Jesus, we know we're in a war against an enemy that's vicious, that's brutal, that's trying to keep us from walking where you want us to walk. And a lot of times it's rough and we want to give up, but God, I pray that we would have that attitude each and every single day as we get up and go out of our house, that we are entering into a war zone where there are no rules, where there's no boundaries, where everything is open, where everything is possible. But God, we won't walk out there then totally unprepared, but we would walk out there having put on your full armor, having put this stuff on our body, on our life, so that when we get out there and the battles happen and we engage in those battles, that we are prepared and we are ready for what we're going to face.